Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Good? Everyone in the back, can you hear me? Yeah? Even through your mask, you can hear me? It's nice to see you. I've been part of the Commonwealth Club. I've had the pleasure of being part of the Commonwealth Club for the last couple of years, and it's great to be back inside this beautiful facility. So if you're here, thank you so much for joining us in person. If you're not here joining us on YouTube or online, we totally understand, and also thank you for joining us. Tonight's conversation is really interesting to me because if you came here thinking, okay, I just want to talk all baseball, I'm sad to admit it's not going to be all baseball. And if you came here to think I want to talk all politics in San Francisco, it's going to be some baseball. So Larry Baer is one of the most remarkable people in the Bay Area to me, having grown up here, being a journalist here in sports and in news, because he's so much more than the San Francisco Giants. I mean, he bleeds San Francisco. Grew up here, we'll get into that. But really, he has his hands in everything as a leader here in terms of San Francisco real estate, the recovery of this great city as we're experiencing this thing through the pandemic. And oh yeah, by the way, the Giants, who've brought us a lot of torture in a good way for the last several decades. Larry is the CEO and president of the Giants. We can talk about an hour or two about his resume and his CV, but I'll keep it brief here. I think you know some of his credentials already. He is not just the leader, one of the leaders of this franchise, but he's also in Major League Baseball a very influential figure as well, through the decades having served in various capacities, a board of directors, or on many major league boards, I should say. He's also a member of the board of directors of the Bay Area Council and of NBC Sports Bay Area. Last year, and this is interesting, Larry helped launch, he was named the co-chair of Advance SF. This is a coalition of San Francisco CEOs and business leaders committed to addressing the community needs as we come out of this pandemic. And there are challenges, obviously, as we know, but there are some successes that we'll ask Larry about. In terms of his day job, his actual day-to-day, he runs the Giants. He has brought us a lot of success. In his leadership, the Giants have been to the World Series 4 times. Remember 2002? That one kind of hurt. But then we had 2010, 2012, 2014, so 3 titles. Also, that jewel of a ballpark, the first privately financed ballpark in Major League Baseball. Before SBC Park was the original name, I believe, was built. As you know, if you've been around the city or the Bay Area a long time, that was not the best of areas. And so now China Basin, Mission Bay is totally changed. And oh yeah, also in the early 1990s, if it weren't for Larry and his group of investors, it would have been the Tampa Bay Giants. So let's keep that in mind. There's a lot more to baseball in his resume. A quick reminder, would love to hear your questions. I don't want to just be talking the whole time. So please, as Carla mentioned, write down some questions for you, and we'll do a little Q&A at the end. And if you're watching online at YouTube, there's a chat function, so send us your questions. So it's great to see everyone. Without further ado, let me sit down and bring in Larry Baer, the president and CEO of the San Francisco Giants. Larry, how are you?
Hi, Raj. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. And thanks for that generous introduction, Raj. I have a couple things. One is, like you, I have great affinity for the Commonwealth Club. And back maybe, 1,000 years ago, I was on the board of directors of the Commonwealth Club back, I think, when I first started Giants early on. And just love the mission, love the voices that the Commonwealth Club allows to be heard, throughout the radio network and throughout the lunches and receptions and all the great events they put on. So just thank you to the Commonwealth Club for all they do, and thanks for everyone joining virtually and in person.
Larry, it's great to see you. I think I speak for everyone on behalf of the room here. It's great to see you and online. Really quick question before we get going. Where do you keep those 3 rings? Are they in the bookshelf behind you or in a sock drawer?
They're a little locked up. It was funny. I was at a sports conference last week, and one of the owners of the Washington Nationals was there. And he was wearing his ring, his Nationals ring from, was that 2019, was it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what year they won it. 19, I think, 18, 19. And, but he was a little, a wonderful guy, but he was a little lopsided because wearing his ring, and he was like, I think he needed like chiropractic services because his ring is getting so big. So I'm content just having them stored away, and it was such an amazing honor for all of us in the community to see the accomplishments of those teams.
Oh, let me ask you, you've been at this for a long time. I don't want to date you here, but a few decades, we'll say. Do you still, every game, are you at a high or a low depending on the outcome, or are you kind of a little more reserved, like I've been through this, I kind of know what's going on, but what's the roller coaster ride like for you?
I mean, I think, you take your lessons from the people who are best at it, people like Buster Posey or Bruce Bochy, or Gabe Kapler for that matter, where you can't get too high when things go well or too low when they don't. But I do have to say, on this particular night, what kind of timing is this, Raj? I mean, did you schedule this where the first time? I think this is the first time we've been swept in LA in 35 years or something, and that's when I go on. So
yeah, for those of you who don't know, the Giants are coming off a 4-game sweep in LA. Can we erase the last 4 days? You're pretty good at this stuff.
Yeah. Well, the really good teams over the years, and I'm happy to say this is our 30th year of this ownership group. So Peter McGowan and myself and those who assembled that group back in 1992. This is our 30th season, and the one thing I never become unemotional about games, and I'm every game this weekend against the Dodgers, and we have a game tonight. Be watching when we conclude here and playing the Diamondbacks in Arizona. And every game, to me, I haven't lost the kind of the feeling I had when my dad used to take me to Candlestick to watch Willie Mays and Willie McCovey.
You guys used to go on the bus, right? From your house. You went on the bus from your house to the ballpark, right? Right. Great memory. It took the 28 Ballpark Express Muni line out to Candlestick, and as so many people, most people drove actually in those days, but maybe 5 or 10% took public transit. Now, with a downtown ballpark, we're at about 50% are coming some way other than their own car. But what I was going to say is I just never have lost the love for watching the game, rooting for the Giants. And what I really enjoy most is being at the ballpark and seeing the collective experience of fans and the communal experience. And, you don't really appreciate it, Raj. We've talked about this before, you and I. I mean, you don't really appreciate it until you lose it. Yeah.
And I'll tell you probably, one of the low points of the 30 years for me was walking into the ballpark in 2020. And I'm not sure how much of this you did, right? As you were covering, much more important matters like the pandemic and the community response. But walking into the ballpark in 2020 with no fans, that was much worse than I thought it would be, in the sense that that communal experience was taken from us, and I think it's a big part of our lives, whether it's at the town square, the grocery store, the coffee shop, the ballpark, Golden Gate Park, being together with people.
Could you briefly just remind us, or maybe even inform many of us, what happened in the early 90s, of how close were we? I don't think I've asked you point blank. How close was this franchise to moving to Florida?
Well, it was really close, to the point where what you had was not a rumored deal, or not a speculative deal, But Raj, what we had was a signed purchase agreement to transfer the San Francisco Giants. And I'll never forget, it was one of our son's birthday dates, August 7th, 1992. It was announced that a purchase agreement had been concluded between the Giants ownership and the a group in Tampa to transfer the franchise for the 1993 season. The only thing, and this wasn't part of the announcement, but the only way it could have been stopped was for the owners of Major League Baseball to vote it down. So it was pending Major League approval. But I think everybody assumed the Major League approval would be forthcoming. And we had a very courageous and dedicated and loving, community-loving civic group that formed 18 initial partners, came together and said, we can't let this happen. We don't know how we're going to kind of solve the problem, which was replace Candlestick Park, because there had been 4 failed ballot measures up to that point, 87, 89, 1990, and 1992, to build ballpark with public money. They all lost. All those measures lost, 2 in San Francisco, 1 in Santa Clara, and 1 in San Jose. But this group came together without a ballpark plan, but said, we're going to put our money in and acquire the team and figure it out. And Peter McGowan was the managing partner, was the person that led the group. He and I kind of did the dialing for dollars, and to try to cobble together this group. And it was wonderful people that, that some were baseball fans, some were just San Francisco and Civic fans. And that group still exists today, which I'm very proud of. 30 years later, the group has actually increased to 35. I have 35 partners in the Giants right now, and they're wonderful civic-minded people, no less civic-minded than they were in 1992, but feeling really great about the fact that the Giants are no longer in jeopardy moving, shall we say, ever.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Let's go to the present day now. And by the way, actually, let me dovetail off that. Can that happen nowadays? Are there civic-minded San Franciscans enough to save a project, to save our streets, to save a franchise, whatever the case is, baseball or not? Because the city has changed so much in terms of focus, safety, demographics, everything. Is that spirit still here in the city like it was in the early 90s?
That's a really great question, Raj, because I think when the early 90s, if we're being honest with ourselves, we had some rock-ribbed, San Francisco companies that had been around for generations and generations. And they really, invested their energies, time, financial resources into San Francisco institutions. And, maybe it was the symphony, maybe it was the opera, maybe it was sponsoring the Giants or 49ers at the time. Maybe it was, parks, et cetera. And some of those institutions just aren't here anymore. And that happens in life, right? So whether it was the Bank of America that was based here, or Crocker, the old Crocker Bank that was based here, Del Monte, I could rattle off a bunch of companies that maybe some of you've never heard of, but they were big San Francisco companies. So what do we have now? So now we have an economy that's largely driven by technology. That is not a bad thing. That's fine. That's where we are in the world. And in some ways, we're blessed, because if you look at the largest, most prominent companies in the world, many of them are based in here in our neighborhood, right? And in the greater Bay Area, whether it's Apple or Google or Facebook, Meta, or just go down the line of all the large tech companies that are moving the economy. But the issue is, do they have the same connection to San Francisco or to our community, the community where they live? And a lot of them do. I think of people like Mark Benioff at Salesforce, who has, it's funny, his mother grew up across the street from where I grew up in San Francisco on the avenues. And Mark has a real soft spot for the city and everything San Francisco, and other tech leaders that are like that. But I think it's our job as working at a San Francisco institution like the Giants to to bring people under that tent. And it's maybe not as natural as it was 30 years ago, because these companies have not been around for generations in serving San Francisco. Employees haven't been in San Francisco for generations. So we've got to inculcate that loyalty to the city, which it's a different world, but we accept it. And there's some great people who are feeling very loyal to San Francisco now, and there's no time like now when we have to generate that.
You talk about Mark Benioff, talk about yourself. These are community leaders that have been here, whether it's 5 years or 50 years. How accurate, how insulted are you, how upset are you about not only the reputation now from a national level of San Francisco, but forget reputation. When you walk down the streets and you see a lot of the problems on our streets here, what can be done? What are you trying to do about it?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's a complex situation we have, but let me make a couple of points. One is that one of the great attractions to San Francisco over the years has been it's a tolerant city, it's a progressive city, it's a welcoming city, it's a belonging city. And those principles and values that we've all had growing up here, and we have cherished over the years. I think what's happened is that, over the years, we've also now found that that the issues with San Francisco are more pronounced, in part because that has been the feeling is that we have to, that gets preserved no matter what. And you obviously have to have limits and have to have restrictions. And as the mayor, our current mayor Breed has said, we have to enforce discipline in the city to at some level. So I think so part of what has happened here is that there hasn't been enough, perhaps, of boundaries created. Having said that, love the fact that San Francisco is a tolerant and permissive city. So what do we do? What do we need to do? I think the first thing we need to do is, as a business person, is make sure that all businesses are leaning in whatever way they can to help on the social issues. And we've started a group called Advance SF, which a gentleman, Lloyd Dean, who's head of Dignity Health, and a number of folks who were involved in the Committee on Jobs are involved in it on the board of Advance SF. And what we're trying to do is look for ways businesses can be involved, not for tax breaks and not to improve permitting and zoning, which businesses obviously are interested in, but to help on issues like income inequality, issues like the street scene and how to improve our streets, the cleanliness, and obviously the homeless situation is got to be addressed. Affordable housing. The Giants are involved in a project called Mission Rock, which is 40% affordable housing, the highest percentage yet from any developer. And the affordable housing in Mission Rock, which is about to be completed, the first residential building will be completed next year, is going to have in the first phase 600 units of affordable housing. We've got to provide homes for people here. I was just in Europe, and it's a totally different situation there, where municipal and regional governments are able to put together opportunities for people to be housed. And it's a complicated issue. There's mental health issues and all, but you've got to be able to at least have the units. And I think that one of the things we've got to do at Advance SF is work hard to find ways to get more housing built. And I think there've been some good developments, and the city leaders, I think, are realizing that we've got to take away obstacles to getting for housing to be built.
Yeah, and I live on the peninsula. A lot of my neighbors will say, or East Bay and South Bay, people North Bay, people say, it's not just the Giants that get impacted, not just the Warriors, but it's the restaurants, it's the delis, it's the civic centers where people sometimes are a little hesitant. You know what? I got to park. My car's going to get broken into. There's a good chance of that. Or there's going to be someone I've run into the streets that's a little unsafe. Those are some real economic issues that many businesses are feeling in real time. Do you understand that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and especially in the core downtown, Raj. I mean, in San Francisco is a tale of kind of two stories here. One is neighborhoods. Many neighborhoods, not all neighborhoods, but many neighborhoods are thriving, right? So whether you're in the Castro, Noe Valley, Marina, Richmond, Sunset, there's neighborhoods that are thriving. There are also areas of the core downtown that are really hurting. And people know about the Tenderloin, but also the core central business district downtown, where the people you're talking about, the small businesses, depend on offices. Mark Benioff Salesforce Tower is not full. It's not half full. And it hurts the person who has the sandwich shop, the person that has the shoe repair, the person that is depending on commuters for their livelihood. So part of it's the pandemic, part of it's the return, part of it is the nature of work in San Francisco, right? Because we're technology led from a business and industry standpoint, and technology is companies are largely remote, are doing more remote work than in-person work. And so how do we adjust? And one of the things Advance SF is looking at is, maybe our downtown, the core downtown, moves to more of a live-work model, and there's more residential opportunities, offerings in the core downtown. And that'll take some time to convert, but that has happened in many cities. There's also, the mayor has launched a program where for 6 months, no questions asked, you can basically, occupy a street front with, subsidized rent, subsidized by the city, just to get the activity going. Because the street scene we've got to be able to have retailers that can function and not have rents absorb their entire business.
I haven't heard that. That's really interesting. That's very interesting. Can we talk a little baseball?
Let's do it.
So I've got 45 questions here. They all say, are the Giants going to sign Juan Soto, the stud out of the Washington Nationals? It's just us, Larry. You could tell us.
So that I know, and I've in my 30 years I've avoided this, and I don't plan on going down the rat hole. As much as I love the Commonwealth Club, and as much as I love our fans, and as much as I love you, Rod, I am not going to get fined for tampering. So
we'll help pay the fine. Yeah. No, seriously. I mean, it's an exciting time for you guys, but really the deeper question is, the Giants have always had a star, not just a Bay Area star, but a national star. And with all due respect, it's not happened right now, especially with Buster leaving. Is that something that's important to the franchise?
Yeah, people ask. We've had in this run since the ballpark's been open. This is the 22nd year of new ballpark. We still call it the new ballpark, and it's already 2 decades old. It's pretty amazing, right? But we've had a couple of 8-year periods of complete sellouts, right? From 2000 to 2007, the first 8 years of the park. And then when we won the championships from 2010 through 2017, past the championship years, we had sellouts. And people ask, what does it take to fill the ballpark? And obviously in baseball, especially, maybe not so much in the NFL, but in baseball, it's critical to have paid attendance, the home attendance. That's the driver. That's well in excess of 50% of the revenue you're going to take in. And I would say there are three components that we've enjoyed in those sellout years, or when we've been successful with fans at the gate. And we're still, every year we're very blessed, because I think our low water mark, putting aside the pandemic, was 2.6 million. So in the 3.3 million capacity ballpark, we've always been pretty full. But the three components, to your point, are a winning team, the ballpark itself and the brand, and then players that people come to see. Now, points 1 and 3 can kind of get integrate, right? So, like last year, I mean, we had stars that we had stars, and we won. So, how much of it was the stars? How much of it was that we won? So, somebody like Buster, let's say. I would say that to be successful, we don't have to have stars on the club in order to win, but to be successful at the gate and with franchise, you don't have to have stars, but it helps. And so obviously people point to Barry Bonds, and it was sort of must see. His at bats were must see, whether on television or when you're there. So I would say that having a star or two is highly desirable, but two points. One is you can't mortgage the farm for the star, because if you have a star, but the team creators in a worse position. And the second point is stars can be homegrown. So Buster, as you remember, was a Giants draft pick. Another incredibly popular Giant, a star, Lincecum, homegrown. Madison Bumgarner, homegrown. So, you can also do it that way. Takes a little longer. Barry, of course, was a free agent signing. It was in our first year. It was our first move. So I would say it's highly desirable, but not at the expense of team performance.
What are conversations like with Farhan Zaidi, who's your operations, your baseball guru? In addition to you sit in a room, and do you have these similar conversations of, okay, there's a Juan Soto out there, there's an Aaron Judge out there, there's player X out there. What's the conversation into, like you just said, do we bring him in? Is he worth the money?
So I think the way those conversations tend to go is, first of all, what's the baseball recommendation? Okay, so Farhan, is a fantastic baseball mind and has a great group around him. Scott Harris, our GM, his number 2. Obviously, Gabe Kapler and the coaches weigh in, but we also have a whole apparatus of advisors and scouts, et cetera. So what's the baseball recommendation? What's going to make the team better? What moves, whether trades, free agent signings, what have you, drafts, but, in baseball, draft takes a while for the players to go through the minor league system and emerge. So, through signings and through trades, what's the baseball view? And then, I would get involved, or the board would get involved if there seems to be, some extra piece to it that could help with the fans. But again, if you're it's all got to push in the same direction. So, it would be wonderful to have a person that could be a marketing celebrity, a star, excuse me, but you don't want to do that at the exclusion of the performance. So you're looking at the baseball recommendation, and then you're putting your twist on it from there.
Do you ever twist Farhan's arm?
No, but he'll twist my arm.
I know there's a more of a timely question now. I believe the Major League Baseball trading deadline is a week from today, maybe next week, I believe. Are you buyers in the market? Are you sellers? You're only 2 games out of the wild card spot. So in terms of the mathematics, you're right in the race, but math doesn't always rule baseball.
Yeah. So historically, we've been buyers, and I think that's kind of that's the given. The exception are some years where maybe we stood pat. But if you kind of look at our trajectory, we've been able to acquire players at the middle of the season where we've actually been even in worse positions. You know, it feels bad. Our position doesn't feel great right now because we just came off the 4-game loss, losing 4 in a row to the Dodgers. But the reality is we're just 2 games out of the wild card, 2 games out of a playoff spot. So we're right there with, you know, a handful of teams. And we've been in worse spot than where we are now in previous years, and we've been buyers. So that might give you a little indication of what our behavior could be. And, you know, I go back to years where it's actually cost us, you know, some significant dollars, whether it was the signing of Cody Ross or for Hunter Pence. But we've been able to, you know, make some difference-making moves at the break. So my strong inclination and sense is that we'll be looking to improve the team this year and beyond. You know, with moves, and so that would put us more in the buyer category.
Larry loves the Commonwealth Club. He just kind of gave us a little tip there. Larry, how do you improve, not just the Giants, how do you improve baseball attendance? Because, as you know, younger kids now, guys and girls, aren't necessarily gravitating to baseball like when we were kids. Games are more than 3 hours long, where 10 years ago they used to be less than 3 hours long. Home runs are up, but strikeouts are up, base hits are down. It's not it's not as fun as it used to be, at least, you know, in my personal opinion, and a lot of people's, of the way it used to be. It's longer, slower, more methodical, and kids aren't gravitating. What do you guys talk about on the league level to how to get fans back?
Well, it's a great question, Raj, and we talk about all the above, all that you mentioned, and I think that it's the sort of the raw materials are there, right? In the sense that we've got young stars in this game. We've got great players, and not just folks on Giants players, but, you know, Fernando Tatis in San Diego and Aaron Judge in New York. I mean, we've got some exciting young players.
Let me jump in. You are such a good marketing guy and such a good, you carry the torch for baseball, but you mentioned Tatis, you mentioned Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout. But when I look at NBA stars, NFL stars, I see them and hear them more often. Baseball stars seem to be kind of hidden, like, you know, I don't know the answer to why.
Well, it's a really interesting dynamic we have in baseball, because I think baseball is the most tribal sport. And when I say tribal, what do I mean? Most connected to your community. If you grew up a Yankees fan, you're a passionate Yankees fan, Giants fan, Dodgers fan, Cubs fan. I'm not saying that doesn't exist in the NBA if there are Lakers or Bulls or Knicks, but it's a long season, and so much is focused locally on your team and your play and the players on the team that the national overlay is just different, right? And so what happens is with the NBA players, and I think we can do a much better job. I'll get to that in a second. But with the NBA players and the NFL players, you know, the national sponsors are aggressively marketing the players. You know, let's take the NFL. Okay, so you have a star in the NFL, and they have national deals, and they're out there, between with a much more national audience. In baseball, if your team, let's say, doesn't go to the playoffs, you're just a lot less interested. If you're, say, a Chicago Cubs fan, and the team's knocked out, you don't have that interest in the Dodgers World Series that you might have in the Super Bowl if your team was knocked out. Now, I think baseball needs to do a much better job. We all have to collectively work on the marketing and the national marketing of our stars, because you take a player like Shohei Ohtani. I mean, he is a generational star. Maybe there's perhaps been nobody that even compares to him in the history of the game. You know, maybe Babe Ruth is the closest for Ohtani's skills. And so we've got to find a way, working with sponsors at the league level, to just infuse the marketing, turn on the marketing for players like that. I think we're trying, but a lot of it is really you go back to your own kind of tribal interests of Dodger fans in LA, Angels fans in LA, and so it's a more localized passion as opposed to national. And look, in football also, I mean, another way to do that is through fantasy, and the fantasy football, and there's betting, whatever. But that's with games once a week. That has been a dynamic that baseball hasn't been able to approach as much. I think there's other more root causes, Raj, that we've got to focus on, that I think we're doing a much better job in the last few years. One is getting the best athletes to play baseball and getting more opportunities for, especially in underserved communities, for people to play baseball. So we're working on an academy at Crocker Amazon Field here in San Francisco. A number of teams have been able to open academies, baseball academies in underserved areas. The draft was just a week ago, and I think it was very heartening that 4 of the top 5 draft picks in this year's draft were, from the Black community, African American members of the African American Black community in the United States, and that is that we've had a much lower percentage of Black players in recent 10, 15 years than in the days of the back in the pre-2000 era. Sure. So we've got to increase that, and some of that is also tied to college scholarships. Baseball programs don't offer the college scholarships, number of college scholarships that football and basketball does, and so that's an issue as well.
A couple of quick hitting questions just on possible rule changes to make the game faster, because just 10 years ago it was less than 3 hours. Now it's more than 3 hours. I believe in terms of just the player's strength, 10 years ago, a decade ago, the average velocity from a pitcher in Major League Baseball was 93 miles per hour. That's 3 miles per hour more than it was a decade ago. So, I mean, the pitchers are getting faster, which makes it harder to hit, and therefore you're seeing all these strikeouts. Would you entertain, was the league entertaining, possibly moving the pitching mound back a bit to give hitters a better chance?
So
Serious
we're trying
question.
a bunch of things, and it's interesting. So the good news is in baseball, and it's not really true in some of the other conventional sports, is we have a laboratory called the minor leagues, so we can test these ideas. And the question is, what problem are you trying to solve? And because we have some very, very shrewd, smart, adept individuals working at Major League Baseball, people like Theo Epstein, who love the game and want the game to be improved and balanced more from the direction it's headed now. Is we've got a fair amount of situations, of games that occur where there's just the 3 outcomes: strikeout, base on balls, or perhaps home runs, because the players are swinging for home runs these days, and so what do you do about that? One way to, and so if it's lack of offense, one clear way to adjust for that is to eliminate shifts. And there's
so instead of having 3 to 4, instead of having 3 to 4 fielders on the right side or left side, keep the traditional 2 on the left, 2 on the right. Correct?
Right, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and maybe you have to confine them to the dirt, to the grass dirt. That'll get more offense in the game. I'm not sure fans personally. I think that, and I think that's something that will happen and probably should happen. But I don't know if fans. I think fans can still appreciate a 1-0 game. But the problem is there just aren't enough balls in play, right? In today's game. So I think that's an issue. The other issue is just time of game, and a pitch clock is something that has been advocated for a while and looks like it's coming here in the next year or two. We have to make an agreement with the Players Association on it, or at least have a committee that includes players approve it. And I think a pitch clock, will have a decent effect. I mean, we had 20-minute improvement on average in minor league games that use the pitch clock.
That's a big difference.
That.
So what happens if I go past these
Yeah.
16 seconds? Do I get a buzz on my hat, or what? How does that work?
Get an automatic ball. Automatic ball. And same thing with the hitter. If the hitter doesn't get in the box, it's an automatic strike. I mean, we are in a mode where I think the commissioner, rightly so, has concluded we've got to take some action. And the game is great. I think we want to get the game back to, because sometimes you talk about improvements and then it feels like you're trashing the game. And that's not the case. I think it's the game we fell in love with, the game I fell in love with riding the bus with my dad, 19th Avenue, the game that we fell in love with, we were talking about before the event started, we talked about George Will and how he waxes so poetically about baseball. That game, is still there, but we have to do it in a contemporary way. And we have to realize that young fans aren't like young fans of 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. They got a lot going, right? And they're doing a couple screens at a time. And they're, not just watching a game either live or on television, but they're checking what the tweets are about the game, or they're texting their friend about the game. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a form of engagement, but we have to go, where those fans are, and those young fans are engaging differently. They at the ballpark, we're changing some things at our park, and you've seen a number of teams have created much more, sort of social gathering areas. So, you'll obviously still have the seating areas of, just the conventional seating areas, but, like on a club level, and you've seen these, Raj, I mean, you have these large plazas where you can watch a game from a large expanse, and you maybe have 40, 50 people in an area, and you're watching a game from a deck, let's say, and it's a great experience. It's a great experience. You can bring your office out, you can bring a whole neighborhood out, and you're taking in the game, but you're also taking in the social experience.
Will you be posting a dance on TikTok after this we conclude?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to be posting the TikTok because nobody will watch my TikTok. But
we'll be watching, Larry.
Yeah, you'll be watching. You'll be laughing. No, we got that, and so baseball has a big presence on TikTok. What is encouraging is that a lot of the players now are really using social media as a way to promote the brand of baseball, to promote their club, and to promote themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we like that. I don't know if you watched some of the national telecasts, the Sunday night telecasts, heavy, and the All-Star game had this, heavy on miking players.
Yeah.
And it's pretty interesting. And last night, the Mets, Mark Canha, or as he said, pronounce it Kana. Last night he said, pronounce my name Kana, and I want to be like a Brazilian soccer star. I want to have just one name, Kana, not Mark Canha. But he was mic'd last night in the Mets Padres game, and it was great. I mean, he was talking about now that he's in New York, he was with the A's previously, his go-to food places, how he gets ready for a game. He's out in the outfield for the people that wanted to talk about baseball. He talked about how he observes the card and the directions on the card of where to be positioned, but how playing for the Mets, that they afford him the ability to adjust off of that if he sees a pitcher with certain tendencies, or he sees there's something going on that would suggest that. So I mean, those sorts of insights, we did not see that when we were watching a game in the decades ago.
It was remarkable. I watched some of that Padres-Giants game, or the Padres-Mets game last night. Also the All-Star game, if anyone in the audience haven't seen that, when they mic'd up and they had literally interviews and players mic'd up, it was great. And Mark Canha, Bellarmine prep grad from San Jose as well, so a local guy. We got a bunch of questions here.
And a Berkeley guy.
Yeah, right.
Cal Berkeley, right?
We got a bunch of questions from the audience, great questions. Here's one. How do you fill the void left now that Buster Posey has retired? That's a great question. On the field and off the field.
It's a great question.
What a great Bay Area citizen.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, let's start with the off the field. Buster and Kristen did something that, it'd be hard to replicate from any player. And they leaned in and they picked a cause, pediatric cancer. And they were all in for, more than a decade in raising funds and staging events and visiting hospitals. And Buster actually just went on the Jimmy V Foundation board, which is a national version of what he was doing here in San Francisco. So, his heart was as big as is as big as his athletic ability. On the field, one of the things we've seen is, I think, catching's an important position, but it's really hard to get such an offensive-minded player at that position. And so Buster is like kind of a once-in-a-generation person. So we're going to have to get the offense from other positions because it's just very hard for a catcher with all the burdens that are, and all the requirements of a catcher to call pitches and taking foul tips off their foot and off their hands to be an elite hitter, but Buster was. So, you have to spread around the offense in other areas, perhaps. I think, and look, and we have like Kirk Casale's done a tremendous job. Austin Wins. Joey Bart is coming along. Our plan for Joey was to, maybe bring him back up a little later this season, but then we had some injuries. So it's you're not going to replace him pound for pound, but you're going to have to disperse some of the offense around the other 8 positions.
I remember Buster was a rookie came up with the San Jose Giants. They said, I think you called us. Said, go out and do a story on this guy. He's a rookie. He's going to be the star. So we go out and find him at the San Jose Giants. Like, oh, he's not here. He's at his house, but you can go interview him there. So we go to his house. He's living in the guest house, the guest cottage of Kevin Franzen's parents in the Willow Glen district of San Jose. And we talked to his wife, Kristen. She's like, we're like, how do you like California? She goes, I've never been to a shopping mall. I mean, it was remarkable. It was so cute to see them at that level, and they have done great things for the Bay Area. Does he come back to a certain capacity, by the way, and in what capacity to the Giants?
Yeah, so we're working on it. You'll see him Saturday. We're hiring Will Clark's number, so he's gonna be back at numerous Giants events, and we're actually working on a role for him. We're working on it. He's working on it. Can't announce it yet, but a role that could be extremely exciting, I think, to everyone. And I think, when you can understand, I think you want to take a little bit of a breather this year. We have the big day in May, and as I say, he'll be at the ballpark this Saturday. Look, he's not evaporating. Trust us, he's going to be around.
You guys do take care of your players in that sense. We got a lot of questions, so we'll do some rapid fires here. We talk about growing the organization from draft picks. Is there one prospect in the farm system, this is a question from one of our viewers, who you would say that's, quote, can't miss label for your future with the Giants? Is there a prospect you can think of that way right now that you can share with us?
Well, I don't want to. I tell you, this is a tough time to share something like that. I mean, the answer is, I don't know about can't miss. But the problem is if we were to identify somebody that we feel really highly about right now, that could be grist for the mill for the teams that are asking for prospects for the trade. I would say this, that in baseball, it is different than the other sports in that it's pretty hard to do a can't miss label on a guy that's in the minor leagues because there's just so much development still left. Whereas you get a guy who's a all-star at college, All-American in college basketball or football player, they can come in and make an impact immediately. For us, it's in baseball, it's 1,000 at bats in the minor leagues or several hundred innings pitched for a pitcher before you really know.
Excellent. Here's one from the audience. You speak about community and tribes. I was wondering how you help foster the small Jewish community in San Francisco. In my view, it is almost non-existent. P.S. Can my wife and I have you over for dinner on Friday?
Shabbat shalom, right? I don't think the San Francisco Jewish community is that small. And we think of it as regional Jewish community. I think one of the things we do, and it's not just the Jewish community, but all the heritage nights we do, whether it's, I'll never forget, we've had tremendous nights at the ballpark with Filipino American Heritage Night and Asian American Heritage Nights. I remember Manny Pacquiao and Tim Lincecum. Probably one of my favorites, highlight a Filipino Heritage Night. So one of the things that I'm really proud of with our organization and what I feel is incredibly important if you have a sports franchise is the inclusivity, that everybody can feel part of being at the ballpark. And we need to do even a better job of it as an industry, and the Giants, sort of throwing out the welcome mat to everyone. We've been very much involved in LGBTQ activities going back a lot of years. And as you know, and this was a big initiative with Peter McGowan, was Until There's a Cure Day, that was to create funding and awareness around AIDS back in the day, 93, 94, 95. When people didn't really understand what AIDS was and what it wasn't. And I'll never forget Barry Bonds and Dusty Baker on the first Until There's a Cure Day in 1994, taking the field with the red ribbon on their jersey and filming public service announcements about AIDS. And so, so I think it's all the. I happen to be Jewish, but it's all the communities coming together. And being truly a town center for everybody to feel included at the ballpark.
Where was my invite to Indian American Night? I haven't gotten one yet.
Raj, my goodness, I don't know. We will get that addressed immediately.
Kidding, I'm
How's
kidding.
your right arm? You might have to be throw out the first ball. You're one of the proud members of that community and proudest member. If you throw out the first ball, we'll have the pitch clock on you, though.
From the audience as well, I believe I met this gentleman earlier. He's a pitcher in college in the Bay Area here. From Sid, what is the most important characteristic that makes an MLB pitcher?
Good question. I mean, I think, clearly you have to have the velocity, and clearly you have to, have to be able to, have the command as well as the velocity. But I don't know, over the years, I would say that, one of the things I found that the pitchers and really position players too, that do the best are the ones that have keep their composure and have the even keel. And so it's, a lot of people say it's between the ears. And I think in baseball, maybe more than the other sports, because the season's so long and the opportunity to get down, because we talk about it being a game of failure, and 3 successes out of every 10 at bats, and you're doing really well as a hitter. I mean, I think as a pitcher, I think of you get squeezed by umpires. You have to really be able to keep your composure. And as a starting pitcher, you're once every 5 games, so you got to be able to have a good routine. So the makeup is good. The other thing that I think, and this was something that our scouts, I remember going back to days of Dick Tidrow, the late Dick Tidrow, who was was an amazing scout of pitching and pitching doctor, used to talk about is ease of delivery. So, the more quote unquote violent delivery you have, where you got a lot of moving parts and a lot going on, a lot easier to be susceptible to injury. And, injury for a pitcher is, whether it's Tommy John or something related to an arm problem is, knocks you out for a long period, typically. So sure. Also ease of motion. I'll never forget when Tidros on Mass and Bumgardner, he talked about how Bum's, his motion was just so easy. He just didn't see anything hurt in his career. And there's some great pitching. We have an amazing pitching guru called Brian Bannister, who is actually from the Bay Area originally, who's done amazing things with our pitching. And you look at guys like Logan Webb and people that we've been able to develop,
Sure.
Danny's done an amazing job.
A couple more minutes, we'll wrap it up here. You lead this organization, but is there a player in the last 10, 20 years that stands out to you that you've learned from just in casual conversations in the clubhouse or at the batting cage or in the off season? And what did you learn? What have you learned from your players?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think that, Buster, I think Buster's got to be right at the top of the list for reasons we talked about previously. But I mean, there have been some players that maybe not some of the big name players and some of the big name players that I've learned from. I think about somebody like Jeremy Affeldt, who was who was really good and was on the 3 rings, but I learned from him service and empathy. He was an incredible, his big event is Sunday night, Generations Alive, which is supports anti-human trafficking, human trafficking initiatives, fighting human trafficking. But he was all about service. And he is, I've never seen anybody better in the community than Jeremy. This might surprise some people, but I learned about focus from Barry Bonds. Yeah. Barry would, before a game, sit at his locker and project. He picture the ball coming up at the size of a grapefruit, and what he was going to do. He had a number of techniques that were super interesting, and he loves being around players so much that, look, we're all pick a calling. You've gone to the top in the television news business, Raj. People do, in whatever their calling is. I just wish that everybody loved what they did as much as Willie loved the game, and after the game, as a retired player and working for the Giants, how he loves working with players and showing up at spring training every year and hanging out and offering his tips.
Really nice. Last couple minutes here. Favorite funny story behind the scenes that you rarely share or you've never shared before with you and one of the players, or just anything with the Giants? Something wacky, something funny.
Okay, well, this was, I think I have his permission to tell this better. If not,
I like when he pushes the envelope.
Because I'll see him Saturday. So in 2010, when we won the championship, we decided to, we talked about this actually a little earlier, how these are huge rings, and they're very gaudy and ostentatious and everything, but we know to some extent that's what the players want. So, but we designed one that was in 2010 that we felt was appropriate, but not way over the top. And the players liked it. The players received them well, or so we thought. And they did receive them well, and it was great. Lots of pride. So in 2012, after Game 4 in Detroit, swept the World Series, Buster comes up to me in the locker room. I mean, literally like 10 minutes after the last out. Champagne's pouring and everybody's hugging and dripping and everybody. And Buster says, you gotta do me a favor. I got one favor to ask. And it's basically, short of writing a check for $1 billion, the answer is going to be yes. This guy just came back from an incredible injury in 2011. He was in 2012. He was actually he was the MVP and won the batting title. Had this amazing year. Sure. What's the favor? when you guys are designing the ring, the championship ring this year, think gaudy.
That is excellent.
So that was a reaction. 2010 being a little understated. And I got to tell you, 2012 was anything but understated. The ring.
Okay, Larry, thanks for your time. Final question here. For everyone here and in the attendance and watching online, just your message to Giants fans, because it's been a challenging season, and granted, we're just halfway through. But give us something that's not candy-coated, but that's something that's serious. But what do we have to look forward to?
I think what the DNA of the Giants, from last year, frankly, is still there, and we're going to work hard at the trade deadline to see if we can add to the team. There's no guarantees there, but I think if we can get our guys back, and Brandon Crawford's supposed to come back in a couple of days. Brandon Belt is feeling better. Longoria's got another week now. He went on the. But if we get everybody back and we're able to, the DNA that we had last year that got us to 107 wins is still on the club, because it's basically the same club. Few changes here and there. In some ways, we've improved the club, we think, with Rondon being a fantastic elite pitcher. So hang in there with us. We've got that DNA. We got that championship DNA. Believe a lot in Gabe Kapler and the way he's approaching how he's going about it with his young coaching staff that's very engaged. So just to hang in there with us. Remember, as we've shown in the past, in baseball especially, if you can get into the playoffs, you never know what'll happen.
Larry Baer, thank you for your time tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Raj. Thank you, everyone. See you at the ballpark.
Have a good night. Thanks to Larry Baer, the president and CEO of the Giants, and thank you to all of you for watching online, being here at the Commonwealth Club here in San Francisco. It's great to see everyone in person and online. For more information about the programs we run, please visit commonwealthclub.org/online. Good night.